Welcome. Welcome to Community of Christ with the Shenandoah Congregation in San Antonio, Texas. Community of Christ is a welcoming and loving faith community. We proclaim Jesus Christ and promote communities of joy, hope, love, and peace. Please take a moment and like our video, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss anything, and comment to tell us where you are joining us from. Keep our contact details and share with us how we can minister to your needs. Find more information at www.seaofchristsa.org. If you would like to view past services, follow this link on our website. We welcome you, we acknowledge you, and we love you. Shalom.
Good morning. Good morning. Aloha. Good to see everybody. She said this is my first time, so obviously I'm a bit nervous. If this is a stinker, I'm sorry, but I brought my own heckler. My son is here, so he can give the booze out for you. And Jeremy, I saw you're up next week, so if it's bad, you're going to look that much better. But after the last message that you gave, I know it's going to be a banger next week, so he'll make up for it. I promise. So the theme today is discerning spiritual witness, which is sort of a difficult one to think about, but I've been thinking about it since I was first asked and pondering it, and this is where I've gone. So as I was pondering the word discerning, and I'm going to do that terrible thing where I'm going to give you a definition. This definition I happen to like, perceived by sight or by the intellect, see, recognize, or apprehend. But more importantly, when I was thinking about discerning, the word stories kept coming up in my mind. So I'd like to share some stories. And then thinking about the relationship between the word discern to stories, I'm thinking of seeking, finding, and understanding the story. That's kind of the point, I guess, I was trying to get to. So here are some of those stories. A few of them will be mine, but some of the others are just stories that I like. Okay? So a little bit about me. I'm not from San Antonio. I grew up in Massachusetts, little town that I call Barry, known for virtually absolutely nothing. It's a small town in the center of the state. I think if you go out to Boston, most people won't even have heard of it. It is the place where the famous photographer Jacob Riis was buried, if anybody knows who he is. As I did a little research also, this is kind of interesting. Walker Lewis was an abolitionist, Freemason, and the third Black man known to hold the Mormon priesthood, having been ordained by Elder William Smith, Joseph's brother. Given the history of this church, I thought that was just kind of an interesting factoid. Really has nothing to do with the rest of the message. But like I said, I just wanted to tell some stories, if that's okay. Had a fairly unremarkable childhood, kind of a dysfunctional family. My mother, and speaking about that, my mother had really kind of grown up somewhat damaged by growing up in the cult of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And it's kind of an interesting effect on my family. But in my teen years, my mother joined Pentecostal Assemblies of God Church. And not long after, I actually joined and was very active. I spent most of junior high and up until most of the years high school very actively involved in that faith, but kind of transitioned away from it. And those experiences, my mother's experience and my own experience in that particular church, not that there's anything wrong with it, but it did leave me with a certain wariness of religions, and while they can do great good, also the damage that they can do. I really spent the following years deconstructing my religious faith and settling into agnosticism. So where am I going with this? I don't know. Like I said, just telling stories. Okay? But what is it that, now that I'm here, what is it that I've come to appreciate about this church and this global faith community? And what was the journey that brought me here? If you're okay with it, the last part I'm going to leave to the end. For this church that is sitting here in front of me, it's very much the people and the community with a capital C, I would say. But as far as the global community of Christ Church, what is it that has appealed to me? What brought me here, and why did I choose to stay coming here? I am fascinated with its history, but I think more so I appreciate the willingness of this church to wrestle with its history, especially its early history, and the evolution that it took over the decades, or centuries now. And then what really speaks to me is the enduring principles. So I'm just going to read them off. Like I said, I'm doing these terrible things where I'm just reading some things off. Grace and generosity, sacredness of creation, continuing revelation, all are called, responsible choices, pursuit of peace, unity in diversity. The interesting thing to have is one of your enduring principles in this day and age. Blessings of community. Ultimately, this speaks to me of a faith community and a faith of, lack of a better phrase, rubber hitting the road. It's a faith in which the actions that we take here on earth is related to other people, how we treat people in the community we create. Frankly, I just don't think we really see that in a lot of religions. Again, not to disparage other religions, but that just happens to be something that very much speaks to me about this one in particular. So, since this is a faith that, in my estimation, is one of action to the world around it, my stories are really going to come from the world, right? Interestingly, when I went into some Bible concordances to look up the word discern, if you look in like Strong's concordance, there's not much there. Like maybe 3 or 4 verses. It's like, wow, that's surprising. Other words, you find 20, 25 verses related to a word. Oh, why? I mean, obviously, I'm aware of the gift of the Spirit, discernment, but much beyond that, there's not. So my stories are not really going to come from the Bible or other books of Scripture that we have. They're stories from the world around us. Do you have that slide that I? All right. A little background for those that don't know me. I don't talk about my job a lot, but I'm a pediatric cardiologist. That's what I do in my day-to-day life, although I retired from the Air Force. And right now I'm kind of taking it easy, doing some volunteer work. So some of my stories are going to be from that. Does anybody know who these people are? Didn't think so. These are from the world of medicine, in particular, my field. On the left is a man named Vivian Thomas. And this is a really interesting painting, portrait of him that hangs at a very special place. So Vivian Thomas was born in 1910. He died in 1985. As a young man, he was, obviously think about the times he lived in. He happened to be a very gifted carpenter, having learned under the tutelage of his father. His goal eventually was to go to medical school. Ultimately, he wasn't able to do that for a couple of reasons, depression, but he would come into the employment of a very famous surgeon named Alfred Blaylock. Initially, this was at Vanderbilt University, Tennessee. And while Vivian Thomas was a carpenter, he ended up taking the job as a lab technician under Dr. Blaylock, who was an interesting guy, known for his temper and rigidness, but gifted surgeon, did incredibly important work along with Vivian Thomas in the area of hemorrhage and shock, which was important in World War II at that time. So he ends up working for Vivian Thomas. At some point, he loses all of his money due to a bank collapse in Nashville. So going to medical school would never be something that he could do. Sorry, am I speaking close enough? I just want to make sure I'm not stepping too far away from. So eventually, Blaylock would go back to Johns Hopkins, where he had always wanted to be, becomes the chief of surgery. And Vivian Thomas goes with him, still as his lab assistant, though because he's Black, he only gets paid as a janitor. Other lab assistants being paid at least a dollar more. In the important history of my world, I don't want to get, I could talk about this for so long, so I'm really trying to keep myself contained. There is a condition called tetralogy of flow. It's just a condition in which babies come out and they're blue because they don't have enough oxygen. And at this time in history, there was nothing to do about it. They couldn't do anything about it. They were going to die. The woman on the right is a woman by the name of Helen Taussig. She was a physician and cardiologist. And she suggested to Dr. Blaylock a way to help these babies out. It's novel, but they needed to figure it out. And again, I don't want to go into the details, but Blaylock and Vivian Thomas did experiments primarily on dogs, in which they were able to recreate the physiology of this defect and ultimately came up with a way to make it better. It didn't fix it, but it would make it so that these babies could live. And Vivian Thomas was critical to this, so much so that when they first were able to do the surgery on a baby named Eileen Saxis in November of 1944, Blaylock fought the system to have Vivian Thomas in the operating room there because they didn't want him there because he was Black, right? Johns Hopkins was not known for their racial progressivism at that time. So Blaylock fought to have him in there because Vivian Thomas had done the majority, the lion's share of the work in figuring this out. And he really had become, even though he was a lab assistant, he was becoming a gifted surgeon in himself. So over the years, and by the way, this procedure was a success. Ultimately, other people were able to figure out how to fix this. In the publications about this procedure, Vivian Thomas was never mentioned. As you can imagine, the long-term relationship between Thomas and Blaylock was complicated. He was respected by Blaylock for his technical skills, but they weren't to socialize outside of the hospital. Like I said, Blaylock was known as being a bit of an ornery man. In fact, at about the age of 19, there was an incident. That would have been back at the time of Vanderbilt. I think Thomas had dropped a beaker. Blaylock came at him swearing, yelling. And that must have been a traumatizing experience. But Vivian Thomas went to him later. He said, hold on, I wrote what he said. Basically he said, I was not raised to accept such language. I will be leaving. And this arrogant surgeon, and I'm sure you all know what the reputation of surgeons is. It was a lot worse even back then. Apologized to him, wanted him to stay. I can't imagine what it would be like for a 19-year-old Black man being paid as a janitor, but acting as a gifted lab assistant, to go up to that man and say what he did. It's an incredible act of bravery. At Hopkins, they would both stay for many years, and Blaylock actually died in 1965, and Vivian Thomas stayed for many years afterwards. And in doing so, he actually trained not only other Black assistants, he trained surgeons. He really had become a gifted surgeon in and of himself. He would go on to even train, sorry, I wrote this down. He would help to train Levi Watkins, who was Hopkins' first Black resident and civil rights activist. He was also a civil rights activist. And Thomas assisted him with the groundbreaking work of automated defibrillator, implanted defibrillator. You guys knows what that is, an ICD. I'm sure some of you know somebody that has it. So, Ian Thomas, what an incredible influence. You've heard of him. That's okay. I realize the world of medicine can be kind of esoteric. What a story. If anybody would like to see some interesting stories, that Vivian Thomas did write an autobiography, but also if you go on YouTube, there's a really good documentary. It's called Partners of the Heart. And then after watching that, because I think that's the better one, there's actually a very good movie that you can watch on HBO called Something the Lord Made. Late great Alan Rickman. This portrait. Vivian Thomas was so beloved by the people he trained at Hopkins. Like I said, trained world famous surgeons. That Hopkins gave him an honorary, they couldn't give him an honorary MD, you can't do that. They did give him an honorary doctor of medical arts or something. And this portrait was commissioned and hangs in the Hall of Surgeons, where everybody else is a physician and surgeon, except him. Wonderful story and a wonderful story of influence that he had. So Helen Taussig, she's really considered one of the mothers of pediatric cardiology. Born in 1898, died in 86. She was a cardiologist, as I said. She went to undergrad mostly in Boston. She would eventually go to medical school at Hopkins because Harvard wouldn't accept women at the time. Interesting thing about her, she had an early infection in childhood. I think it was measles. Interesting thing to hear about her. And was partially deaf in childhood, but actually by the time she's an adult, she was really completely deaf. As cardiologists use their ears, she trained herself to be able to do some of the diagnosis with her hands. And like I said, she was part of this story, part of the team that came up with this procedure that still is used today, some versions of it. And another other interesting story about her, does anybody know what thalidomide is? I think some of our older people. So thalidomide was a drug that was approved in many countries. It was owned by, the patent was initially owned by a company in Germany. And in Europe, it was very well known for, it was supposed to be a sleeping aid, but what it was actually useful for was as an antiemetic, something that made you not feel nausea, which was wonderful for pregnant. It's being used for morning sickness. The only problem was people were noticing that at the time, babies were being born with significant defects, particularly of their limbs. Something called phocomelia, where the limbs were being shortened. And some people in Europe were getting suspicious that it had something to do with thalidomide. It was a German pediatrician that was one of the first ones to be concerned about it. She had a student who came to her and expressed the same concern. So she actually went to Germany and looked at the information and agreed this was dangerous. And so the United States actually didn't see this because the FDA never approved it in the States. And think about it, this was a wonderful drug for morning sickness. In Britain, where it was called Distabal, the company that owned it, this was said, Distabal can be given with complete safety to pregnant women and nursing mothers without adverse effect on the mother or child. Outstandingly safe Distabal has been prescribed for nearly 3 years in this country. You know, some companies here wanted that approved. They were going to make some bank off of it. Right? Helen Taussig was one of the people. She wasn't the only one. I know there were others that were instrumental in the FDA not approving that drug in the United States. That's why the US didn't see these babies that were having the effects of. It's another story. I'm gonna leave that. And I will come to a point, hopefully. I want to tell you one of my own stories. Story where I needed to learn some humility. Doctors are humble, but it is important. A few years back, I was at BAMC where I worked, and I was what's called a ward attending. So when you're doing ward attending, I was the pediatrician in charge of the inpatient pediatric. So just doing general pediatrics on the inpatient side. We would have to do that for a week at a time, maybe once or twice a year. And my team had gotten a call about a toddler that was being sent over from Wilford Hall. This baby didn't sound really all that sick. And honestly, it was kind of one of those that really they have to come into the hospital. Everybody has to come to the hospital when they're sick. I always like to say, hospitalization is not always a benign procedure. You can get sick in the hospital. I also happen to know that the pediatrician that was sending this baby over recently graduated from the residency and was sort of one of our middling residents. Okay. So, toddler comes over. Really looks like we would have expected. Not that bad. A little under the weather. So talking to my resident team, I have 3 residents, an intern first year, and 2 senior residents, a second and third. And like we're gonna have this kid ready to go tomorrow morning, get discharged. Kid looks pretty too good. Don't want them hanging around in the hospital because, like I said, you can get sick from just being in the hospital. So the next morning comes around, we do our morning rounds, see the kid's sleeping, but poke on the kid. Sometimes annoying a kid is a good diagnostic test. If they're able to get up and be mad at you, probably not that sick, right? So kid looked fine. Like I said, just a little tired. So I'm like, all right, get this kid teed up and ready to be discharged. So in the afternoon, as we're getting everything ready to do the discharge, I have to read the discharge summary because I have to sign my name to it. I'm reading it, and the resident put a couple of words in there. I honestly don't remember, but one of the things when we're writing charts, certain words that you don't want to put in a chart, right? So in the world of pediatrics, an irritable child is a sick child, meaning there's something really wrong, right? On the other hand, if I write fussy but consolable in mom's arms, it's a kid that's under the weather. They're safe to go home. If I wrote irritable, I'm not sending an irritable kid home, because that's something that could be more dangerous. And there was a couple of places in the note where some words like that would be used in terms of the resident. Like, look, you can't write that stuff in the chart, right? You can't send a kid home if you're going to write that chart. And my 2 senior residents were actually both Black women, very good residents. And I say that because I have to think there's some, not only the social hierarchy of medicine in which I am the attending physician, they are the residents, the trainees. Okay? The social aspect that they're both women, they're both Black. The one that wrote the note said, that's what that kid looks like. Okay. So we went back and what? She was right. Kid did not look right. Not flagrantly sick, just did not look right. So the next step, the details aren't super important, but what had to happen was a spinal tap. So the thing we're worried about is meningitis in the way that this kid was living. And given the way the kid was now even more sleepy, needed an MRI in the head. On the way down to getting the MRI, the results of the spinal tap came back. When it comes back that quick, it's usually not. And in fact, there was meningitis. Later on, the infectious disease doctor that we consulted said this kid should look way sicker for his cerebrospinal. And the MRI did show effects of what we call encephalitis, where there's been inflammation in the brain. I was not the hero of that story, people. I wanted to send that kid home. wanted that resident to change the note so it would look like that kid was safe to send. Those residents saved my behind. Okay. So what are the point of these stories? When I think about Vivian Thomas, stories, discernment, think about the stories that we have to look for, that are not widely known, that are somewhat even hidden. And now we live in this day and age in which we're seeing systematic erasure of stories that don't fit the narratives that those in power want told. Think about the things that are being erased from government websites. This is somewhat of an aside, thinking about interesting times, thinking about how the new word of the day is woke. It's being used as a pejorative. We had a perfectly serviceable reactionary term, right? We used to say politically correct. So what's so special about woke? Really seems just something, special about it because it initially came from the Black community. Wonder what stories people are trying to tell and using that word as a pejorative. What stories do people want known about? Well, like I said, that's what I said. Also with Thomas, he went to Blaylock, what he said to know his own story of what he was willing to do and not to, the boundaries that he was willing to have. That is a story. He had a discernment about himself, what was right. I'm always amazed by that. Ellen Towson. She listened to her student about float mine first. And then she had to go seek out the stories over in Germany about this. And then I think about, like I said, by the time she's practicing as a cardiologist, think of cardiologist, what do you think about? Got the stethoscope in their ears. She had to learn a new language of reading the story with her hands. Sometimes we have to adapt, figure out new ways of hearing the story. So here's my last story. This one is me. Why did I come back to some version of faith? And I'll be honest with you, I'm still developing, figuring out where it's going to go. And one of the appeals of this church is, I've seen the words non-creedal, where it does not required to believe necessarily a certain way to be a member of this church. And I like that because it allows me some breathing room to figure out. So here's my story. Wow. All of you see May come with Mrs. Ortiz. You know her as Rebecca. I always call her Mrs. Ortiz. By the way, her daughter was Jessica. Jessica was my best friend. Wonderful person, character. I'll tell you, as I was going through ugly, hostile divorce, she was one of my anchors of support. Back in 2021, and by the way, I did ask permission to be able to tell those stories. So it's okay. In 2021, Rebecca's husband died. He was in the hospital. During that process, Jess would ask me questions about medical things. I didn't know. But not long before Mr. Ortiz died, Jess decided that Mr. Ortiz should get an apartment. House they were living in wasn't the right place to be. So Jess decided that an apartment in the apartment complex that I was living in would be a good place. And part of that was I was around. So that's where I got to meet Mrs. Ricketts. Just always appreciated that I'd be around to help things. We started to get to know each other. I had breakfast for her place. It was kind of breakfast for me a couple of days a week before I went to work. And over this time, we got close as a mother-like figure. Jess herself loved my kids. Really was like an auntie to them. And they were blessed. So back in December of 2023, I had to get a sleep study. Believe it or not, this sleep physique makes itself a little prone to sleep apnea. So I wanted to get a sleep study. Northwest side in San Antonio. Did our typical thing, texting, saying goodnight. Proceeded to not get much sleep. Was diagnosed with sleep. Left at about 6:15 in the morning. Drove back to my apartment. And, as tired as I was, I just couldn't really get to sleep. So I turned the TV on for a little bit, watching some YouTube or something. And I was late. And I look at my phone. For those of you know my phone number, it's not a local area code, it's actually in my area. And I'm getting a call from a 210 number at 6:45 in the morning. Okay. But I figured, oh, you know what? I must have left something over at the sleep clinic. So I'll answer it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have answered. I would let it put a voicemail. So on the phone was actually Jeremy, Justice's husband. Over the years, I had a very cordial relationship with Jeremy. I wasn't friends with him. But it was unusual that he would call me. He was calling me because he had been trying to call Rebecca and couldn't get a hold of her. So they think Jess had a stroke. Okay, where is she? And I went over to her apartment, knocked on her door, told her what was going on. We went to the hospital. Unfortunately, Jess had a massive stroke. She did not make it. So shared that loss. I didn't realize I'm getting very short on time, so it was a blessing to be able to be in the hospital during that incredibly difficult time. It's nice to be able to help interpret things for other people that may not have the words of esoteric words of medicine. But that's not so much the point. Afterwards, I really asked Sorties, why don't you come stay over at my apartment? And then eventually, when I decided it was time to move to a house, have more space, she come over. So she came to live with us. That has been. What's the point of that story? There's more to it, but this is how I started coming back to the thing. As I started seeing all these pieces that were put together over time. Now, obviously, I hate that sad events is what happened. I feel like they were going to happen. There was the blessing, things coming together in this way, in which I could help Jess with losing her, which led to my relationship and my friendship. I think one of the final moments was that phone call. Would have never answered it. 6:45 in the morning, I would not have answered San Antonio phone call. I wasn't expecting, but for the fact that I thought maybe something. So as far as discernment, I think that still small voice, just being open to it.